Tyler McKnight. I'm sitting here with Herm Edwards, who is currently the Arizona State football coach. And today, we want to talk a little bit about the Boys and Girls Club, the Outback dinner that we're going to be doing, and go ahead and talk a little bit about what it is that you've done with the Boys and Girls Club, how this has gone on for you.
Well, first of all, I was a Boys and Girls Club member. It was
Right.
a boys club back in the day.
Yeah.
And lived on the street on the Luzerne. And our neighbor, his name was Mr. Beaver. He had an open bed truck. And I can remember he would collect all the kids, and we'd get in the back of the truck, and he'd drive us to the boys club. And it was a place where you could congregate.
Mm-hmm.
You met other kids that lived in the city. But, back then you rode a bike. Your mode of transportation was a bike. If you didn't have a bike, you walked.
Yeah.
And it was a great way to meet young people. It was also a place where diversity to me was very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
And when you walked through those doors, it didn't matter if you lived on Luzerne, Highland Street, Soto. You all were a part of this Boys and Girls Club deal. And it kind of, for me, it always reminded me that when you walk in the door, there's this unity, there's this trust, there's this team thing going on. And it was a safe haven for a lot of kids when you think about it. Then it didn't provide meals like it does today. So it is really leaps and bounds. It's really taken a place where now it's the Boys and Girls Club.
Right.
We actually had some girls come into the club. And I can remember Cynthia Washington at 10 years old still beat me running. I can't shake that. But, that's kind of how it was for me. And then from there, I grew up in this little town called Seaside in California. When I played pro football, I would always come back, and eventually I got on the board there, and we started a capital campaign to build a new Boys and Girls Club. We got that done. So I'm still involved with the Boys and Girls Club in my hometown.
Well, that's actually pretty great to hear, and obviously the Boys and Girls Club has played a huge role in your life. How did that shape who you are today, not just as a person, but as a coach and a leader?
Well, a lot of mentoring.
Yeah.
And whether it was from high school students that were a little older than you, that you respect, you looked it up to, it was a place that you could have hope. And with hope comes excitement, comes anticipation. You always had a person that seemed to have answers. When you're young and you walk into a place, your mind is running 100 miles an hour. Some questions you're afraid maybe to ask your teacher or your mom and dad, you could ask the leader in the Boys and Girls Club.
Right.
You could ask them those questions where you felt free to speak, and they had knowledge. And I think it's a place where a lot of mentoring goes on, which is very, very important.
We talked a little bit about how you do some work with your community back in California. Let's go into a little bit of what you've done with those with developmental disabilities and how that's really progressed and become a very important part of your life.
Well, I think when you grow up, there's a couple things you realize when you grow up. You work to make a living, but what you give is to make a life.
Yeah.
And you always want to give back. And especially when you come from a community where you feel like you're a part of that community. When you're an athlete and you go on to college, not only do you bear your family's last name, you bear the community's last name as well, because all those people follow you. And I can remember the community I grew up in, they followed me all the way from college to professional football, being a player and also a coach. So you represented that community. It was
Right.
it was a sense of pride that you come from there, and you wanted to do things right because you felt like you paved the way for others to follow. And you always want to reach back and give them a hand up, not a hand out, but a hand up. And I just think that I've always felt that way. That's part of your obligation.
And it's interesting you mentioned that. I'm an avid football watcher, so I watch Sunday Night Football on NBC, and I've always noticed that not all players mention the college they went to, especially my favorite ones. I'm like, well, why didn't you mention that you went to my alma mater? I want to brag about you.
Right.
But they mentioned their high school, and one that sticks out to me has always been Deshaun Jackson, who mentions Long Beach.
Long Beach Poly, the Jackrabbits.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of their way of not giving back, but giving that hand up to those people out there. And
Sure.
cool.
Marshawn Lynch is a big guy
He
from
is.
Oakland.
Yeah.
He went to Cal Berkeley, but he's an Oakland guy, and he represents the city of Oakland.
Right.
Whenever you hear him talk, he's always about the neighborhood that he grew up in. And when you come from a Boys and Girls Club, there's a sense of pride in the fact
Right.
that you were part of that club, and all those kids that follow you, they know the kids that have gone to the Boys and Girls Club. Kids are very very smart in following. And if you're an athlete or something
Right.
like that, they know the kids that have actually walked through those doors. And It's a powerful message when you continue to grow as an athlete and you go on to college, because you're representing not only, as I said, that community, but also the Boys and Girls Club.
Mm-hmm. It's a lineage that they can really go off of. Since the football combine's going on, I'm very familiar with college football, and there's one man that always has stuck out to me, at least in this past year. It's Shaquem Griffin from Central Florida. Man, I tell you, I've been watching ESPN, his highlights, and watching him at that combine. What do you have to say about what he's accomplished? And I mean, he could potentially be a professional football player and be on a roster. And
perseverance.
Yeah.
And I think in life, what you have to realize is you never let anyone else set your expectations. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very important when you're young. People always have expectations for you, but you have to set your own.
Yeah.
You have to live your life. And I think he's gone about his life in a way that is really inspired others when you watch him. When you watch him compete in a game that's very, very difficult.
It's amazing.
And for him to have an opportunity to play pro football, it would send a powerful message. Mm-hmm. And I think he's going to have the ability to do that.
I think so too.
So it's going to be fun when this transition occurs.
If you could give one piece of advice for the kids, what would it be?
I speak to a lot of groups, and I've always told them this. Life is about choices.
Yeah.
And you got to choose your friends. Mm-hmm. You don't allow them to choose you. And the next thing I would say is this. Be willing to bet on yourself. You got to be willing to do that. Mm-hmm. With that comes sacrifice. You're going to have to make some sacrifices to achieve things. You got to give up something to get something.
Right.
It's not free. What are you willing to toil at to be successful? There's no instant success. It's still hard work, but it's the ability to bet on yourself and set your own expectations. Don't allow other people to do that.
Right. And that reminds me a little bit back to being a kid, and I think every kid's probably heard this at some point in their life is, you can do anything or be anything you want. And I know some people think that's not true, but when you really think about it and you put yourself in that situation, I know for myself at least, is I go into it giving 110%, and I've been able to accomplish anything I've set my mind to. But if I give 99%, I'm probably not going to reach that goal.
Well, most people are afraid to fail. That's why they don't give 100%. Mm-hmm. And I think through failure, you gain confidence through failure. And I think when you look back at your life, you have to ask yourself, did I put all my effort into something I wanted to do?
Right. Because
if you didn't, you're cheating yourself.
Yeah.
You never want to cheat yourself. Life is not a dress rehearsal. You don't get to go back.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like time always moves, and you never get to go back. That's ancient history. You got to go forward, and so you got to make sure you put yourself in position to succeed, and it takes a lot of hard work.
Well, and building that confidence, and the one thing I've learned is, building confidence is failing and then learning how to progress from that and not making the same mistake, being insane, so to speak.
Yeah, and this is where your friends come in. I've always said this: friends, when you're about to stumble, mm-hmm. they'll catch you so you don't fall.
Yeah, so boys and girls club does.
And that's what good friends do.
Yeah.
They when you stumble, they're going to be there to catch you. So I think that sometimes you have to go out beyond your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. People are not willing to do that because they're so worried about failing. And sometimes you got to find yourself by going out your comfort zone. And sometimes that, puts you in a position where you have to lead.
Right.
And that's the problem about leading, in the fact that you got to step away from the crowd. Most people want to be liked. You don't need to be liked. You want to be respected.
Yep.
Leaders are respected. They're not always liked, but they're respected. And when you become a leader, you realize that.
Well, how do you get that respect? I mean, I'm sure people ask you that all the time, and that's a hard answer.
Well, not really. It's real simple. It's just two words: words and actions. Do they match up?
Yeah.
Do your words and actions match up? Yeah. And if they do, then people will follow you. You'll learn how to lead that way. It's called integrity.
Yeah.
Because eventually what we do in the dark comes to the light. So your words and your actions have to match up every day. Not just sometimes, but all the time. And if you're willing to do that, you will gain respect from people.
Well, I think I learned something today. Thanks, Coach. Just real quick, don't forget the Outback dinners tonight.
Outback too, man. That's good stuff.
You're going to be there, right?
I'll be there.
He'll be speaking, and there's going to be some memorabilia autographed by Coach himself.
And Texas Tech, was Guns Up? That's what they do it out here, Guns Up?
I think so. I'm a CU buff, so guns I don't know.
That's where we go. They go Forks Up too. So we got Guns Up, Forks Up. We got all that. A lot of things going up.
Well, we look forward to seeing you guys out there, and there's going to be plenty of things raffling off. It's going to be a great night, provided by Outback Steakhouse, and we look forward to seeing you there. And I really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Coach.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.